He is definitely, I mean, you can look at his credentials. He knows what he's talking about. There's no question about that. And I definitely advise our listeners to listen to that because he has a lot of wisdom. And so, I mean, my take on COVID is kind of like, I think there's no question that a healthy lifestyle helps you fight COVID, without question. Healthy lifestyle in terms of the way you eat, in terms of the way you exercise. Like you are doing yourself a disservice when it comes to fighting COVID if you're just sitting inside, not exercising, and not thinking about the way you eat. And if you think that the vaccine is just the solution where you're just going to get the shot and you're going to be fine, I would warn against something like that.
Yeah, I think ever since the start of this pandemic and all this, it's really exposed a lot about society and opened a lot of questions about government overreach, questions about the legitimacy of vaccines. So many things have been exposed. Even like I think I read some news story yesterday how New York, they're accepting people of a like certain race when it comes to treating vaccines. And I also like on Twitter I saw a question, or some people were like questioning whether if you're unvaccinated, whether you should wait in line to get treatment. Well, it's kind of like, well, since you get a vaccine, you kind of did it to yourself, so just go back out there. So there's a lot of groups have been demonized because of this pandemic, and a lot of things I've been thinking about this too, like about government overreach. And in an ideal society where you want government to be your friend and you should trust government, unfortunately that's not the way it is, because people with power, people who are in power don't have the best intent most of the time. And that's why I think people should do their research themselves, you can't listen to this one source or this two sources because you never know what they have in their mind for you. That's why I really believe, do your independent research, see what like caters to you, and even sometimes question your own premises or your hypothesis about the way things go. But I think this pandemic it's affected a lot of things, and it's opened up like a kind of Pandora box of how should we deal with this. Because I talked about this last week. Let's start with government overreach. A lot of people saying, well, the government should do all they can to make sure everyone's vaccinated. But I don't think it's ever going to happen 100%. I don't think 100% of people are vaccinated from polio or like from all these other diseases. You can't vaccinate the whole world's population. That's over 7 billion people. Then, here in this country, we have over 300 million people. So somehow, some way, you cannot vaccinate everybody and make sure that everyone's protected against it. So I've been thinking a lot about government overreach, because a lot of people were like, I don't think government should tell me where I should put my body. This is my body, my choice, all that. Like especially from the right, and the left is like, well, listen, the vaccine works, do this, just vaccinate it, do your own part, and everything will be fine. But the thing is, if it's really a pros and cons. If the government does make hypothetically 100% of people get vaccinated, it opens up a new power. This is power they could use over and over again. And sometimes it could be for your best interest, or sometimes it can't be for your best interest. I think there was the government before they did a study where they infected people with syphilis. I forgot what it's called.
The Tuskegee
experiments, yeah. So a lot of people are, going back towards that, especially people like minorities, like Black and Hispanics. I'm like, wait, the government has done this before, so I'm kind of not trusting the government in doing this. So yeah, I just want to ask about your opinion, because it's really a Pandora box. If the government has this power to make everyone get vaccinated, this is power that's going to lead to new things. A lot of people saying vaccine passports. If you don't do this or that, you can't shop. The lefts are like, well, you should take your vaccine, and yeah, I'm going with this. But like right wingers are kind of pushing back against the government like always. But isn't that resulting to more deaths? When the lefts are like, well, the government should do their own part and make sure that we're protecting every single person from dying from this disease. But then that leaves government's power unchecked. So what's your opinion?
Yeah, so when it comes to thinking about government overreach, it is a very difficult question. I think without question, our founding fathers would probably be appalled by the government reach.
They'll be appalled by a lot of things.
And yes, absolutely. But that specifically, I mean, I think, and here I speak, I'm not just talking about the left, I'm talking about the right too. I mean, long ago, the right departed from the kind of small government model, and they're about just as big government as the left. They just would like to impose different things on people.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and it is different. That is a generalization, of course. But like, generally, we are we are so accepting of a government that like just has its fingers in like our lives all the time. And I mean, the idea of the founding fathers, from what I've read of people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and John Adams, is that like they saw the federal government as something that necessary to like represent our country to other countries and to do other things like protecting our nation, but they did not see it as something that should have its hands in every private person's life. I mean, really, they set up our system of government so that the federal government does what it has to do. The states then govern the people within the states. But I don't think they would have. I think they would be turning in their graves to think about all the things that the government now does to the private citizen on our everyday lives. And I tend, while I don't agree with all of the ideals of the founding fathers, I tend to agree with them on that. I mean, I think that the average everyday person should be able to live their life and make their choices as an individual. The government should not necessarily be dictating to them what should happen. Now, the question of public health is raised, but like I said, like we've talked about previously, we talked about COVID. There are different views on the vaccine. I mean, like the gentleman, Peter McCullough, who I mentioned, he says, I mean, after 6 months, apparently immunity, he claims immunity drops from 80% all the way down to 20%. And
after you take the vaccine?
6 months after you take the vaccine, that's why you need a booster shot now. And it's like, and at the same time, like all these big pharmacy companies are vested in the vaccine, so they're collaborating with the government. There's a conflict of interest. So it's like, it's not as simple as this is the answer to the problem, here it is, why are you refusing to take it? It's much more complex than that. And you have to respect people's right to say, I don't choose to take the vaccine. I mean, I think what Bill de Blasio has done in New York City is despicable. You can't tell people they can't go out in public if they don't have the vaccine. That's their choice. Like, you can encourage them to do it, but you shouldn't have to force that on them. I mean, like, ultimately at the end of the day, it's up to them, just like every other decision. And the scary thing is that, like, think about it. Like, I mean, you brought this up. If the government can tell everyone to get the vaccine shot, what can't they tell people to do? I mean, I think it's attributed to Thomas Jefferson, although I'm not sure that he actually said it. But he said something like, there's a quote along the lines of, like, any government powerful enough to protect you from anything is also powerful enough to take everything from you. And it's true. I mean, like, what next are they going to tell people? I mean, what's going to stop them from, like, let's say, like, abolishing our freedom of religion or abolishing the right to carry arms or things like that, if they can do that? And so, like, people are consenting to all this because they're terrified. But I think it's scary. You got to think about the consequences down the road. I mean, there's another quote. I don't know who said it, but he basically said, like, nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program. So, like, once the government takes power, they're not giving it back. That's not how it works.
Yeah, that's why you got to be careful.
And also, you're crazy if you think the government has your best interests at heart. Those politicians who sit in Washington, they have their best interests at heart. I mean, we talked about leadership earlier on and what servant leadership looks like. I don't know, like, all of them personally, but, like, from what you see, like, like they're worried about getting elected to their next term, right? They're worried about their political career. They're not worried about your individual life.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's like, I find it terrifying to think about putting my wealth, like, letting people like that who are sitting there who have no idea who I am dictate every aspect of my life. To me, that's terrifying. And so I would say, like, I don't think it's bad to get the vaccine. I personally haven't chosen to get it. And that's my personal choice, and I think that should be respected. I can respect somebody else's choice to get it. That's their that's their choice. That's fine. Like, either way, it's like, I think we should be careful of other people. I'm not saying this because I think that, like, we should just, like, let COVID run rampant. I mean, I think it is a serious thing. I mean, like, right now I have a friend whose mom is seriously sick with COVID. And so I think we should take steps to protect people who are vulnerable, especially the elderly and those who are immune compromised. Yeah. But, like, at the same time, like, I don't think, like, we should let our fear drive us to the point where, like, basically, like, the government is running our lives. I think that is a scary place to be honest.
Yeah, I saw this meme, and it was like, they found us in 2021 or 2022, and they were like, you freed the what? You know, because how they had slaves and stuff, and, like, Emancipation Proclamation and stuff. That was something else.
And even if you think about, like, the vaccine, and even if I don't think there's any malicious intent with the vaccine, but there's no question that this vaccine has been rushed out to fix the problem with COVID. How do we know that they know all the long-term effects of the vaccine? Like, how do we know that, like, people who take it aren't going to, like, in years, like, down the road, that, like, there's not going to be issues with it, or that it's not going to have side effects that they don't know about right now? and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but I think like you have to let people think about those kind of things and make their choice. If they're worried, like, and you need to respect people's choice. Like, it's not like the vaccine is something that is 100% pro and there's no cons to it. There are cons to it. There are. I mean, like Peter McCullough talks about in that same interview, he talks about the fact that like actually for people who have already had COVID, the vaccine can actually like have like negative effects. And so it's not actually helpful even for those people. And so like it's not like it is not like the be all end all solution. And so I really think it should be up to people on an individual basis to take it.
I do think people should question. I always say people should question authority and question, people who tell you to do things. Just because sometimes you never really know what they have in their mind, whether it's for their best interest or not. For example, like let's say financial incentives, because these vaccines were provided by private companies, and for a company to survive, you need to have money. So if I'm a company and I have a vaccine, why wouldn't I be pushing it out or do marketing campaigns to push this vaccine out? So I'm just saying, it's not like don't get the vaccine or like just get COVID or go without mask or anything. But I'm just saying that people should question a lot of things. I don't like when people are sheep and they just like go along, and because sometimes your government, unless like it's your parents, they don't have your best interests. But like the government for sure doesn't have your best interests. They really don't care. Most of them only care about getting reelected. And but the thing is about like in this point in time, I do think history is gonna judge us, whether bad or good. For example, I told you about habeas corpus. To jail anyone who were dissenters or who supported the South, to make sure that the North won the war and make sure that this was a perfect union as he saw in his eyes. And there are examples of government overreach there. Freedom of speech was taken away. Like if you're supporting the South or supporting slavery, you were gonna get jailed. So I'm thinking like, is there moments where government overreach is necessary to keep people safe? And is that you could use that in this moment? Is government overreach needed to keep people safe from COVID? From take the vaccines, mask up, do this and that. So what's your opinion on that? Because history did judge him. Like a lot of people, I think people make the mistake of looking at history so in a simple way. It's very nuanced. For example, if the South won the war, Abraham Lincoln would not be deemed as a hero, or he would probably have been hanged, and the South would control the narrative that we won the war. This was what it was because of. So I'm like imagine if how things flipped, how history would have judged them. I'm so like thankful that the North won the war and like Emancipation Proclamation would free the slaves and stuff like that. And history would judge Abraham Lincoln like, wow, he's such a good president. He really ahead of his time and stuff like that. So I wonder if 50, 100, 200 years from now, I don't know how people are going to look back at this. Either the people are going to look back at it like, damn, really the government just took their rights like that and they didn't even fight back. They just like sat down. Or people might say, oh, how dumb are they? Like the vaccine works, so obviously why didn't they take that? So there's something, like some things we can't control. Like we think we're right. For example, like Robert E. Lee in the Civil War thought he was right.
Yeah.
George Washington thought he was right. And he did win the war. So yeah, I really wonder, like history really judges people without their control, because we think we're right, but then in 50 years or 100 years or 200 years, people are going to look back at us and say, wow, you were off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy to look back at history and look at the consequences and be like, oh, that was a good decision, oh, that wasn't. Like, and you're 100% right. Like, if Abraham Lincoln suspended that and then like lost the war, people would have been like, oh, like
dictator.
And so there is a line. I don't think I really know where that line is. I just think whenever that happens, we should be wary of those things because of like what I said earlier. A government that's big enough to like tell you that, like to do that and to protect you can also do that to your like take everything that you think is important. And like the question then becomes like, is the government like the question comes down to it, do you trust the government? Is the government right? Is the government wrong? I mean, the government's made up of fallible people, whether it's a fallible king or whether it's a fallible like House of Representatives or a fallible like Senate. Those people are fallible. They don't always make the right choices. And so, like, I just, like, I think we should be wary of just giving those people, like, just power over our lives. And I think, like, I do believe in the individuals. And I'm not saying that I think the individual necessarily makes better choices than those people, because the individual is also a fallible person. Yeah. But I think the right of the individual to make those choices should be respected. And like, I think like we can take a silly example, like the law to wear your seatbelt, right? Like I even question that law, not because I think it's bad to wear your seatbelt, but because why should the government be telling me to wear my seatbelt? Like, if I'm gonna like go out and do something stupid and not wear my seatbelt, that's my choice, right?
But yeah, isn't the government's job to like protect the people?
Yes,
though? Like,
yeah, it is to protect us, but the thing is, like, when does that protection stop an invasion begin? Like, I don't know, like, I'm not against like a seatbelt law, and I think that is probably a good thing. But like, I'm just giving a silly example. But like, you have to draw the line somewhere. Like, do you want like what like when are you going to say no to the government and be like, yeah, that's too far? And like, the times like this is especially dangerous because people are scared, and when people are scared, they act like sheep and they just do whatever they're told, and they just like they're willing to just basically give all their freedom to the government, and that stuff's not coming back. It doesn't come back. Like the government won't be after COVID. We'll be like, like you gave us all our freedom, like you gave us like all this power during COVID. We're going to give this all back to you. That's not how it works. No, it's not coming back. It doesn't come back across the table. And so like, it's scary to me how many people, because they're so terrified of COVID, are willing to like basically, I mean, like, I think this could have a drastic effect on like the future of our country, to be honest, and the way we think about government, and like you're saying, government overreach. Because what's going to happen when the government tries to do something else in years go past, and people are going to be like, well, back during COVID, the government did that, so it must be okay.
That's true. I do think, as I said, people should question motives, and they should not.
Yes.
They shouldn't just go like sheep, and
we should all. And this is the problem. Everyone should be able to think for themselves. Yeah. That doesn't mean everyone's going to come up with the right conclusions, but you should have logical reasons for believing what you believe, and for voting who you're voting for doing what you're doing. And those reasons should not be dictated by things like your emotions all the time. Emotions aren't bad, but like having your life run by your fear or this or that is a scary thing, because it leads you to do things that aren't helpful in the long run.
Yeah, like something you said about people with fear and how they tend to act like sheep. I think after 9/11, there was a Patriot Act, which sought to monitor and to who people who were deemed terrorists by the United States government. And the whole thing added up to Edward Snowden exposing governments and how they spy on its citizens and stuff like that. Yeah. So, people, history right now, looking back at it, is saying, well, people, you shouldn't have, said yes to the Patriot Act, because how the government is basically, the powers expanded, and they could spy on anyone. NSA, CIA, FBI, they could spy on anyone who they deem a terrorist. And sometimes you're not a terrorist, just like, well, we deem you a terrorist, so we're going to spy on you. Yeah. So I do think, in an ideal society, and I do think government should push for people to trust them. But then we have to be wary. Yeah, we have to kind of question the motives, and because you can't say government is the power be all, or just take everything from me just for my safety. I think you should definitely be wary of their intentions, because there are some people who power goes to the head and like, I just want to get reelected, so I'll lie to my people, I'll do this and that, I'll divide them up just for me to get reelected. So I don't know, but I also talk about a relationship between government and the people.
Yeah, and it's hard because there's been so many different kinds and forms of government, and to be honest, I still am not sure that what the best form is. I think our form of government here in the United States is a great thing, and it was made kind of to combat the evils of something like a monarchy or something like that. But I actually think if you have a good monarch, there's actually a lot of pros to a monarchy that we don't have in our country. But also, if you have a bad monarch, it can just go so far down that it can be bad. So it is challenging. It's hard to know how the government should relate to people, because I think a society without government is not it couldn't function, and it's we need government, but the question is, what kind of government do we need?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And we also have to just realize that government is fallible, and like you're saying, I don't think we have to be 100% skeptical, but we do need to question and think about things. And it really bothers me when I see people, and I especially seen this with COVID, who just believe whatever's on their television or whatever President Biden gets up and says. And it's those people, since when did you think that those people had your best interests at heart, that they know who you are, and that they're telling you the truth all the time? People, this is a world full of people who are people are not there's a lot, people all make mistakes. We're all fallible.
That's true.
And some people go beyond making mistakes to outright lying. So it's you can't 100% believe everything that's presented to you as truth. You need to question, you need to go, you need to to test,
do your own
to
research.
test it. Do your own research,
doing
test
research,
it.
which unfortunately a lot of people don't do. So
Yeah.
it's easier for
It is.
someone to
It's
tell you what to
lazy.
do.
It's
Yeah,
lazy,
and like,
but-
yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because as you said, there are a lot of people say democracy, yeah, but there's also there's some pros to being a dictator because, or like having a one-party system because you get things done like this.
Yes.
Unlike here, we have
The problem though is
two.
then who, and at the end of the day, it all comes down to the fact that like, who's holding that accountable? The scary thing about government is in some ways no one holds the government accountable. So when you have the one-party system, like no one's going to stop. Like the thing about the two-party system is that they can kind of hold each other accountable to some sense. If you have a king, nobody's holding him accountable. He can do whatever he wants, and he's the one who kind of determines what's good and what's not for the people, and that's a scary thing.
Yeah. So I've also like, what should be the relationship between a government and people? Because when I listen to Milton Friedman, he's an economist. He's a libertarian, and obviously libertarians believe that governments should, I think, only federal defense and something like taxing, but then that's it. Like everything else, give it to the private sector. But at the same time, if you give it to the private sector, they have their own financial incentives. Like example, the vaccine, and it's like we're gonna mass produce, gonna make the vaccine fast, and we're gonna ship it. We're gonna sell it as fast as possible to make money because that's how our company is gonna survive.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's like, okay, governments, they don't have their best interest, but sometimes the private sector is not gonna have their best interest too
No.
because it's only run by money, you know. So it's like a lot of people always seek perfection, but like there's always pros and cons with everything else. In a country where the government is running most of the things, I think there's a little less financial incentive.
Yeah.
Because government is our money. We're gonna like, you know, like a lot of people make jokes about Congress, like they spend money like they have
Yeah.
infinite amounts of money.
It's easy to spend other people.